Are we filming? Yes, we are. So welcome to another video. I want to talk about the value of a binder, a personal organizer, a Filofax, another brand. What is the cost of ownership? Because it is not the original ticket price of that item, is it? Because it all depends on how many years you use it for, how many years it lasts. And then you can divide that cost of ownership. Although I do appreciate it can be quite a lot of money. It's we all know, don't we, that a binder or a personal organizer is an expensive thing, and sometimes we wonder how on earth can something, a piece of leather and a ring mechanism, cost so much. But we still have to buy them, don't we? But ultimately, it depends on how many years we use it. Although there are a few hidden factors, and one in particular that I'll get round to, and a few things that may shorten a binder's life that we're just not expecting, which can reduce the long-term value and increase potentially quite dramatically the long-term cost of ownership. So let me give you a few examples. So if you took, and I'm speaking from the UK here, let me take the Filofax Malden, which is a very, very popular personal organizer from Filofax, the Filofax brand. That might cost you £130 if you're paying top dollar or top pound for it. How long would that last? Let's just say that lasts a good 10 years of daily use. So how much is the cost of ownership, assuming nothing else goes wrong? £13. So to be honest, that is probably the bargain of the century, and far better value than, for instance, well, I don't know. I can't think of anything offhand, but it is a bargain, in my opinion. But if you take something cheaper, like a Filofax domino, that might cost anything up to £40. Again, if you pay top whack and don't buy it in a sale, that might last, shall we say, 3 or 4 years. So you can see that the cost of ownership for something like a domino may be more than the cost of a more upmarket binder such as a Malden. So this is a tricky thing, and I'm going to go a bundle on this, but I'll try and keep it brief. It obviously the build quality of a binder, personal organizer, has a dramatic effect potentially on the cost of ownership. If you take some vintage binder that's made of full thickness leather, a very, very basic thing, just a piece of leather, single piece of leather, and or maybe 3 pieces if it's something like a 3CL slimline, where there's 2 extra pieces sewn together to make pockets, but it's a very, very basic item. Full grain leather, no synthetic materials used, a single good quality ring mechanism. It's not the best materials in the world, because it may be made of Moroccan leather, which has in the past been a sort of budget choice in terms of the leather quality hierarchy, but there's potential for that to last 100 years. So the cost per year of ownership, despite the fact it's very, very good materials, is very, very, very low indeed. Much lower per year than some modern binders. I'm not saying all, because there are some that are made of even better materials today, but comparing it to a synthetic binder today with a thin layer of leather on top, it is easy to understand how a vintage binder of yesteryear has a lower cost of ownership, especially if you buy it second hand, and it's still got another 50 years of life left in it, and it's 50 years old. You can't buy these things new, although you can buy similar. You can actually buy similar binders, almost identical, in fact, but certainly not here. I believe they're made in India by Filofax, contracted out, and then they're sold as facsimile models on the Japanese market, because they're obviously more that Filofax believes that that is a more demanding market, and so they cater for that market. It's a shame that they don't here in the UK, but it's no big deal when there's so many vintage binders surviving for you to choose from. But if you get bonded or synthetic covers these days, and they look fantastic, from day one, but over time they start to crack or fade or split, and you get that. You start to see that nasty, the nasty stuff, shall I say? Then it's going to affect the number of years that binder is going to be used. I mean, it might ultimately be thrown away within a few years, but it is what it is. And if that happens, then over a lifetime, shall we say, from being a student to a pensioner, you're looking at maybe 50 years, maybe a little bit longer. In that time, if you are a fan of personal organisers, if you buy a synthetic version with a thin layer of covering, you might be lucky, and that binder lasts you a full lifetime. And I'm not talking about those people that like to chop and change their binders. I mean, I feel slightly hypocritical because I own nearly 200 binders, maybe a few more, and I find that the acquisition of another binder, that process is almost irresistible. So it's I speak from I'm clearly a statistical outlier here, but if you are just in inverted commas normal person, you might have 1, 2, maybe 3 binders. Then if you are that person and you buy a binder that is synthetic with a leather covering, thin leather covering, if you use it with care, it might last you a lifetime. But statistically, I would say if you're using one of those binders rather than a full thickness leather binder, it's not going to last so long, and you might have to buy several binders in your lifetime, and that replacement process might be accelerated by the elephant in the room. But I'll talk about that later. Because there's actually quite a few elephants in the room, but bear with me on this, because otherwise it's I'm chomping at the bit here to get on to the alarming stuff, but I've got to hold those thoughts for the moment. So just getting back to the idea of construction and materials, quality materials, there are certain things that can reduce a binder's life. For instance, pen loops that can go saggy, for instance, that are made of elastic. Great when they're new, but after 50 years, is it going to last 50 years of sagginess in terms of the elastic? Probably not. Is that strap, which is made of some sort of synthetic material with a thin layer of leather on the top, is that going to split and fall off? Poppers seem to be okay, regardless of the age. They seem to last. I can't think of any poppers in my collection that have failed. So that's okay, I guess. That's okay. Pen loops, that's another problem issue with regards to ones that are folded over leather, and this is a really big one. If it's folded over leather to give the illusion of thicker leather, and then when you put in your pen, I'm trying to find a pen that has a flat nose, but if you use a flat-ended pen and it catches the hem in the middle, it can get so annoying that you end up throwing the binder away because the pen loop is just utterly useless. Whereas ones made of full thickness leather, they tend to last a long time. So it could be the case that there's one thing that's not working on your binder, and you think, stuff this for a game of soldiers, and you just chuck it in a drawer. I don't think people necessarily chuck them in the bin because they might donate them to a Goodwill store or a charity shop in the UK. But their relationship with that particular binder has ended because of something minor, like a catched hem inside one of these cheap pen loops. So that is another factor. Okay, so you knew that I was going to mention this, didn't you? So this is one of the most overlooked features of a binder. When I bought this, now I remember being given a cheap W.H. Smith binder a year before this, so around about 1992. I think it was sort of $9.99, so quite relatively cheap, and this was 5 times more expensive, $49.99 at the time. And the cheap one, I distinctly remember the reason why I didn't use it, and that was non-existent flatability. You opened it and then it snapped shut. You open it, snap shut. And it was so stiff. I think I used it for about 5 days and then just quietly put it in a drawer. I didn't want to offend the relative that had bought it for me, because it's not their fault. They didn't know. They knew that I was into notebooks, etc. And so they thought, oh, that's good. And in fairness, when I bought this, I bought this without really appreciating how good the flatability was. But the flatability of this was literally from day one as good as it is now, because of the way that it's constructed with separate stiffeners, one here and one here, rather than a single one going across the spine, which basically makes the binder almost impossible to have good flatability. But this had good flatability, and the thing is, this isn't something that, in this case, I'm talking about Filofax, but there are other binders. Now, Filofax never mention flatability. They do not discuss it. They do not. It's not a selling feature for them, because they're not. Some of their models have very, very bad flatability, so they're hardly going to want to draw attention to it. Whereas other models, such as the Me Plus and the Plotter, they actually make a play of the fact that one of the most important design features of their products is good flatability. And they use techniques to make sure that their binders do have good flatability. So it's a unique selling feature for those companies. But Filofax, just taking an example, there are others that are bad with flatability, but Filofax don't mention it. So when you pick up your binder from the shelf in the store and have a look at it, or look online, or look at their website, there's no mention of flatability whatsoever. And then you get it, and then you discover, without even realizing initially what flatability means, you discover that the item you've bought has got poor flatability, and that means that you might, I gave up after a few days with my first one. It was a W.H. Smith's own brand one, I believe. I put it in a drawer, and then it after 2 or 3 years, when everybody had forgotten about it, I quietly I actually put it in the bin. I didn't even give it to a charity shop. But that was around 30 years ago. I have had this for 32 years now, and I'm really, really pleased about Flatability. And that Flatability from day one has protected this binder from an early death. So Flatability can make an enormous difference to cost of ownership. If you buy one of these, something similar to this, and it has poor Flatability, and someone else buys another one that has good Flatability, which one is likely to have the lower cost of ownership? So let's just work it out. I'm not going to do the maths, but to spend $9.99 on a binder that lasts 5 days before being put in a drawer because the Flatability or the lack of it makes it useless, that is more expensive. That has a greater cost of ownership per day. So that's £3 a day. This is 30 years. This is 30 years old, but 32 years old. You split that $49.99 I paid back in September 1993 over 32 years. That's just a few pence a day, if that, isn't it? Very, very good value. Okay, so there is a thing that is not immediately apparent when you buy a binder. But it exposes itself sometimes very, very suddenly, where you can have a binder. You can have a binder. Looks absolutely fantastic. This is a leather binder. It is a compact Finsbury. Actually, this has got really good Flatability. I'm very, very impressed. Why has it got good Flatability? Because it has 2 separate stiffeners each side of the spine, rather than a single one. I mean, I've mentioned this dozens of times now, so you get the picture. But the design is very, very good. But I wonder. I mean, I bought this very, very cheaply from someone that was selling it on eBay, and I wonder whether the reason why. Because the rings are great, the Flatability is great. It's a great binder. It's a great binder. But I suspect that this is the bottom, isn't it? I suspect that the reason why this ended up on eBay was because someone was having their cup of coffee in the morning and enjoying using their binder, and then suddenly they notice a split in the leather, and they maybe took a magnifying glass to the split and recoiled in horror because of what they saw. And what they would have seen in there is some layers of cardboard, or what appears to me to be several layers of cardboard. So imagine someone that bought a leather binder, and it looks nice, it's well engineered, well designed, good Flatability, perfect. It's even got one of those saggy elasticated pen loops, which initially are fabulous because you can suddenly use a bigger pen, but then quickly over the years get just a little bit nasty. No one likes saggy elastic, do they? But then they probably saw this and thought, oh, that's nasty. And so I thought, I know, I'll just get rid of it on eBay. And so I bought it, and I bought it specifically because I wanted to show I needed one that had it had started splitting, so you could see inside underneath the leather. And I would say that is the splitting of the leather and that sudden discovery that it's not a leather Filofax, it is a synthetic Filofax with layers of cardboard and padding and plastic with some a thin layer of leather on top to make it a leather, but to make it look like a leather binder, even though a few years down the line, or maybe a few months down the line, if it's being used in anger every day, the situation suddenly changes. If you have a binder, and it's not an easy thing, if you have a binder that cannot be repaired, for instance, if you need to replace the rings, it's a lot easier to replace rings from a binder that is riveted through, and it's not so easy if you have one of these where, and I'm using the compact Finsbury again, where it's riveted in, but the rivets are hidden inside the covering, the leather covering. So this is almost impossible to repair. If you have a binder that is where the rivets go all the way through, and that's typically the cheap ones, they are repairable because you just drill out the rivets, put some new rivets in, and away you go. So that, despite the fact that looks fairly cheap because you've got the exposed rivets on the outside, that can actually be a really, really good way of. It's likely that your binder will last longer. The only problem with that is that construction methods tends to only be used with cheaper binders. So the natural wear and tear and decline in desirability of that binder as it gets older kind of trumps the repairability. But with older binders, you've got a base plate and you can replace the rings by keeping the same base plate, and the base plate itself is hidden inside the material and sewn in, but you can actually replace the rings. So an older binder with a base plate where you put the rings and they're slotted in is infinitely more repairable than a more modern one, where this is the worst of all situations, where the actual rivets heads on this side is hidden and it's riveted in. Cheaper rings, sometimes they might need replacing, but it is likely that the rings will not be replaced on, for instance, this model, the Filofax compact Finsbury. Other more expensive ones, well, if you look at this one, this is a this is a modern one. This is the Filofax Heritage, but you've got a cover plate, and as I understand it, underneath there is a base plate. So this could potentially be repaired fairly easily, as I understand it. I've not tried it, but there are some models being made by Filofax, for instance, that do have the traditional type of construction which lends itself to repairs if indeed that is necessary. And some other companies offer a repair service where they can replace the rings for you, but I'm not sure whether Filofax will do that. That's something I need to email them about. I'm going to write that down after this video. So I want to talk about sustainability because this is it's an emotive subject, but essentially, and this is how I feel. If you have a binder that you love using, I mean, it's a tactile thing. I mean, this is why many of us buy. I imagine this is why we all buy binders rather than just using 2 bits of cardboard and some treasury tags. We enjoy using these things, like a nice pair of shoes, or you ladies, you like to have a nice bag. You buy it for a variety of reasons, but if it works for you, then no one can say, well, that's too expensive. It is what it is. Or maybe for us guys, a watch, even a mobile phone. We don't necessarily need the most expensive phone, but Many of us have a really expensive phone. We can't really explain the reason, and if we're put on the spot and asked to try and explain it, then we get a bit agitated about it. But I've got a bit of an itchy nose just talking about the sustainability. I don't know whether the two things are linked there, but the emotional attachment we have to a binder can make a serious difference to the cost of ownership, because if we're happy with a binder and we're happy to stay in love with it as it fades with age, as it deteriorates, as it gets a few nicks and scratches on the leather and it becomes a bit dog-eared, it is possible to stay in love with that binder, so long as that gradual degradation, that deterioration actually is in keeping with that binder that we love. If we start to think, oh, it's looking a bit naff, then you know the sort of thing you buy. I'm just going to take an example, and I don't mean to criticise Filofax, but let's say I've bought recently an example of their Filofax original in patent leather, and I bought it to see just how bad it looked, and it did look bad, and I imagine that's why the original owner sold it, was because there's no such thing as a patina or patina that develops with patent leather. It just gets a bit cracked, a bit dirty, a bit discoloured. So if you're in that situation, then I can totally understand how, for instance, the cost of ownership of a Filofax original will be much higher than a Filofax Molden. They're similar prices, but the Molden after 5 years will probably look much better than a Filofax original in the patent leather, which doesn't wear very well with age. It's the emotional attachment that can massively reduce costs of ownership by virtue of you not wanting to replace it so often, or even at all. That would be the goal, wouldn't it, from the point of view of sustainability? And then there's the elephant in the room. Okay, so the elephant in the room is this mechanism that we all know, love, and are familiar with. Doesn't cost much, the difference in price between, I paid just under £2 for these, full retail on Amazon. So the trade price would be maybe 20 or 30 pence, something like that. Typically with this sort of thing, the markup is 1,000% between factory gate price and retail. So they don't cost very much. As I understand it, the trade price of a high quality Krauss ring mechanism is about £2, $2.50. So in terms of the actual percentage of cost compared to the whole binder, this is a very, very small amount. But you do find these cheaper rings, these budget rings, in binders that are relatively expensive. I've always been quite surprised with that. Would I'll give you an example. Would I want to buy a Filofax Molden for £100 with budget rings, or shall we say £110 with Krauss rings? I would definitely go pay the extra tenner, because obviously everybody has to have their cut in this world. But I would be more inclined to buy a Malden for 110 with Krauss rings than £100 with this sort of ring. But this is the elephant in the room, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter how good your binder is, how much you're in love with it. It's a question of trust. You're trusting that binder to keep your paper, your precious documents that are important to you, important enough for you to have made some to put pen on paper, and you're entrusting that ring mechanism to hold everything together. When you're in a cafe, when you're on a train, when you're on your way to work, when you're walking down the corridors of power, you want a decent, you're putting your trust in the ring mechanism, especially when your documents may be of a sensitive nature, and you don't want someone picking up a discarded document in the street. So if you get to the point, and sadly, I mean, I'm still using this. It's okay, but even a brand new binder can have dodgy rings, misalignment, or gaps, and that can easily mean that you fall out of love with a binder that you've previously been in love with. You've had a strong attachment to. So I would say probably the biggest thing, other than a day when you have your coffee and you discover, horror of horrors, what lies beneath that thin sliver of leather. The biggest thing that gets people to discard or abandon their binder and buy another one is a ring mechanism with faulty rings. That is the biggest thing. And if you have a binder with faulty rings and you do put it in the drawer, then if you buy a replacement and the first one with faulty rings lasts you 25 years and the second one lasts another 25 years, so you reach retirement just using two binders, well, your cost of ownership has doubled. But what if you're continually finding this, and over the course of 50 years, over the period of 50 years, despite initially setting out with a leather binder you think is made of leather, and you might with a fair wind get to retirement age using the same binder if it's fairly good quality. What if you end up every 5 years or so have a problem with the ring mechanism, which results in the need for a replacement binder? So instead of having one binder, you've ended up over the course of a working life with 10 binders. Your cost of ownership per year has increased by 1,000%. So instead of it costing you, with a good quality binder costing say £100, shall we say, over 50 years, that's just £2 per year, which is fantastic. But if you're buying one of those binders every 5 years because of a ring mechanism failure, then you're not paying £2 a year, you're paying £20 a year. And in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't make much difference, but it's unnecessary. So I would say the ticket price of a binder is one thing, but what determines long-term cost of ownership per year is a totally different thing. And when we buy a binder, if we're looking long-term, and I think we all should, we should all, there is a trend to buying products that last, whether it be a car or a washing machine or a lawnmower or a Filofax or a plotter or a Me Plus or a Vanderspec. Whatever you buy, there really should be an emphasis on the length of time that product can be used before failure or disappointment in some way. So I rest my case. Cost of ownership per year is more important than the original ticket price. Thanks very much. Until my next video, goodbye. I'm going to have to make some more coffee now because that's a bit cold.